if you're listening to the Bible reading today, it actually sounds like pretty serious business, what's in one of these cups. So, thanks Robert for reading the Bible for us there. And I just want to step through what Robert read from Revelation. And we often talk about this passage as being the three angels' messages, because there's three angels coming in and they're each saying something. And the first angel we read about in verses 6 and 7. Turn this on first. Here we go. We've got the first angel, and I'll just read verse 6 for you. It says, "Then I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people." Now, it tells us that this first angel has the eternal gospel. What does the gospel, what does the word gospel actually mean in English? Good news. Yeah. So it's just a Greek word that means good news. So what's some good news that you might have had in your life lately? Has anyone had good news?
Got a weekend off.
You've got a weekend off? That's awesome news.
I had a good result from an operation.
That's fantastic news.
I've got a shiny new second one and walking through right now.
There you go, that's good news. So, but we're told that the good news that this angel has is for everybody. It's not just good news for one person, a good medical result or a good test result or the birth of a baby. It's good news for everybody. And the good news is the good news about Jesus. Oh, hello. I wasn't sure if I was meant to pick them up and speak to them.
No, she's just listening.
Hello, Cheryl. Thanks for joining us. This good news is the good news about Jesus and that he's come and that he's died on our behalf. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then this angel also tells us in verse 7, "Fear God and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, and the sea, and the springs of water." And then this angel is followed by a second angel, who has a very simple message, but it's a little bit cryptic perhaps as well. In verse 8 it says, "Then another angel, a second, followed, saying, 'Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She's made all the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication.'" So here we are drinking again in these verses. It's lots about drinking and cups. And I don't know if you've looked around our world lately, but it's full of injustice. Does anyone know what's going on over in Gaza at the moment? Yeah, it's pretty terrible when you read that the supply of food and water and essential medicines has been cut off. And so there are children and adults that are dying of diseases that are actually quite preventable or dying of starvation because of this. And we have the war in the Ukraine, which we've almost forgotten about because there's not much we can do. So we just kind of push it aside. But even in Australia, we have a look around and we see violence, and we see that I read that one in 3 women has been physically assaulted, and 1 in 5 has been sexually assaulted, and that most cases of this actually are fueled by alcohol. And we see that our world it's not heaven. Something's wrong. And we look around and there's a lot of injustice. And I just wanted to ask you if you want to see justice come. Do you want to see justice come? Do you think that would be good news to see justice come, to see an end to all this injustice? And the angel talks about Babylon in this verse. Is the angel talking about a country, an empire that existed a long time ago? No, not really, no. It's used as a metaphor in Babylon for everything that stands against God and against his rule in the world. So all of these powers of injustice are part of Babylon, and sometimes Revelation talks about this as a beast or as a woman or a city, but here it's using Babylon. And Babylon, if you look around our world, seems to have all of the power. It seems that everything is going Babylon's way. But this second angel tells us, don't be fooled. God is going to bring justice. The sentence has already been passed. This angel is telling us that Babylon has fallen. He's saying the sentence has already been passed on Babylon. It's going to be destroyed with all this injustice. That's all going to come to an end. It's like somebody, I guess, who's on death row and they're still alive, but they know that the sentence of death is hanging over them. Babylon is fallen, its days are numbered. And it reminds me of Psalm 73, which I'll just read a little of here. I saw the prosperity of the wicked, says David, for they've got no pain, their bodies are sound and sleek. They're not in trouble as others are, they're not plagued like other people. Pride is their necklace, and violence covers them like a garment. They scoff and speak with malice. Loftily they threaten others. They set their mouths against heaven, and their tongues rage over the earth. People turn and praise them and find no fault in them, and they say, how can God know? Such are the wicked, always at ease. They increase in riches. All in vain have I kept my heart clean and washed my hands in innocence. Do you ever feel like that? You're like, why am I doing the right thing? Why am I trying to follow God and do what I know is just and right? When it seems that the way to get ahead in this world is to just ignore God's rule. Surely God's not watching. But this second angel tells us very clearly that God is watching and that God knows what's going on and that God is bringing justice and that we just have to wait to see it come about. So this brings us on then to the third angel. And I'll just read what the third angel has to say. Another angel, a third, followed them, crying with a loud voice, those who worship the beast and its image and receive a mark on their foreheads or on their hands, they will also drink the wine of God's wrath, poured unmixed into the cup of his anger. And they will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels. So that doesn't sound very good. So what's it talking about here? It's talking about a mark and a cup. And basically, Babylon that we've been talking about, the beast, Satan, whatever name you want to put on this opposition to God, they're attacking God's commandments in every single way. And I've got a picture here of somebody giving allegiance to a king or a ruler. And it's basically all about who we give our allegiance to. Some people will feel like that psalmist in Psalm 73 and say, how can God know? Surely this is the way to go. I didn't finish reading Psalm 73, by the way. He goes on to talk about his response to that. But some people will go along with it quite knowingly, knowing it's evil, knowing it's wrong. And this is what we see indicated by the mark on the head. That indicates that it's like a choice and a knowledge that you're doing this. Whereas others will just go with the path of least resistance, like, this is what's happening in the world, I can't fight against it, I'm just going to go with it. And that's what is indicated by having a mark on your hand. So this is really talking about allegiance here. And it's saying that those who do give their allegiance to Babylon, whether it's willingly, knowingly, or whether it's just by going along with it, will drink this cup of God's wrath. So what's the cup of God's wrath all about? Let's have a look back in the Bible further to see what it talks about as this cup of God's wrath. Oh, is that readable? Yep. So, Jeremiah chapter 25. I might just read it from here. Take from my hand this cup of the wine of wrath, and make all the nations whom I send you drink it. In verse 15. Then he goes on further down to explain what this cup of wrath is all about. And how can you possibly avoid punishment? You shall not go unpunished, for I am summoning a sword against all the inhabitants of the earth. And in verse 31, he's entering into judgment with all flesh, and the guilty he will put to the sword. So here in Jeremiah chapter 25, this is God's response to injustice, to wrongdoing, to evil that he's seen in the world. He's pouring out the cup of his wrath. And throughout the Bible, when we read about wars and disasters, they're often shown as being the cup of God's wrath or the consequences of sin. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to drink that cup. And a lot of people would question what kind of a God would want anyone to drink that cup. But do you think that God does want us to drink that cup? No. He, in fact, states it very clearly. In Ezekiel chapter 33, verse 11. I'll read it again here. As I live, says the Lord God, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from their ways and live. Turn back from your evil ways. For why will you die, O house of Israel? Amen. So God doesn't want anyone to drink that cup. And in fact, he's gone to incredible lengths to provide another way. And we read in Matthew chapter 26 that Jesus was the one who has drunk this cup. So just like I gave the choice there to Daniel, if he could drink that cup or not. Daniel's a very kind fellow, and he drank that cup. And Jesus drank this cup for us. So let's read about that in Matthew chapter 26, 36 to 46. And I'm going to have to turn and read it again. Sorry, my eyesight's not this good. Oh. He threw himself on the ground and prayed, My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want. And I found a picture there. I have to confess I used Leonardo AI to make that picture. And I asked it to make a picture of Jesus on the ground in anguish, praying in the garden. And I don't think they quite captured the anguish of Jesus there. He could be actually praying quite normally there, yes. Yeah. But I believe that when Jesus was in the garden, that it wasn't like, oh, please God, take this cup from me. It would have been like a cry from his absolute depths, like, Father, take this cup from me. It would have been, it tells us that he was sweating drops of blood, which is medically actually a thing. You have to be in a very, very deep state of anxiety, of anguish to do so. And I can't imagine being in that state. And Jesus was in this state because he had lived a perfect life. He'd never done anything to warrant the judgment of God. But he was choosing at that point to go ahead and take this cup of God's wrath for all of us, take the judgment for all of the things that we've done. Not just us here today, but everybody right back through history, and everyone who'll follow us, and everybody in the whole world And Jesus had always been in perfect relationship with his Father, but he knew that taking on our sin was going to completely sever that relationship. There was no way that he could relate to his Father when he was carrying that load of guilt and sin on our behalf. And when Jesus prayed here, then he went on to go before the Jews, and they couldn't find anything real to accuse him of. So they made up charges against him. And then he was taken before the Romans, who didn't know what to do with him because they knew he was innocent, but they bowed to the pressure to send him to crucifixion. And Jesus was crucified, and here he fully experienced God's wrath on our behalf. And he cries out again in anguish on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Because, as I've said, with all of our sin on him, Jesus and God's relationship was broken at that point. And Jesus was on his own. And this must have been much more crushing than the pain of being on the cross. But before he went to the cross, Jesus spoke to his disciples, and he offered them a different cup. At the Last Supper, it says he took a cup, and after saying thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for the forgiveness of sins." I don't know if they knew what he was talking about at that point, because he hadn't yet been to the cross and shed his blood for them. But here he's offering them that he will drink their cup, and they instead can have the cup of forgiveness and grace. And Romans goes on to explain this further. In Romans chapter 5, verse 6 to 11, it says, "God proves his love for us, in that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. Much more surely then, now that we have been justified by his blood, shall we be saved through him from the wrath of God." So it very clearly says then that what he's done for us, his blood, this cup that he's offered us, that he offered his disciples, saves us from this wrath of God. So no one needs to drink the cup of wrath. Jesus has already done it. And I'm with the first angel on that one. I think this is the absolute best news ever. But God loves us, and he hasn't made us robots. So we can choose to accept this gift of love and grace from him, or we can choose not to. He won't force us to choose the cup of grace and mercy. So ultimately, we have to choose a cup. And we're told, we might have time very briefly now to consider this, but we're told that a time is coming when we either drink that cup of forgiveness and will be sealed with the seal of God. So we read before about the mark of Babylon or the beast on your forehead or your hand. Here in Revelation it also speaks about getting the seal of God. And this is only offered on our forehead, it's only given. We can't follow God just by going along with things. It's a real choice we have to make. It's a conscious choice. It's a choice to make him our King and to have his character written on our hearts and our minds and to keep his commandments. Or we have that choice if we want to bear the seal of the beast of Babylon by our conscious choice, or by making no choice at all and going with the crowd. So there are two cups before us. One of them leads to death, and the other one to life. And so today, my challenge is, have you chosen a cup? Which cup will you choose? And if you're here today and you don't know if you've made that choice or you want to make that choice, then come and speak to me or come and speak to anyone here that you know and trust, and just tell them that you'd like to know how to make that choice. But I'd like to continue now, if you'd like me to. And I know you enjoyed last time that I sang something that went along with the service. Today I don't have my wonderful friend Narelle, who plays so beautifully on the piano, so you'll have to put up just with me singing. But this song, to me, just really echoes this choice we have and just tells us very clearly about what Jesus has done in drinking that cup for us and in instead offering us this choice of his cup of grace, his cup of forgiveness. So this song's called Consider Christ, and if you know it, sing along. Consider Christ, the source of our salvation, that he should take the penalty for me. Though he was pure, a lamb without a blemish, he took my sins and nailed them to a tree. My Lord and God, you are so rich in mercy, mere words alone are not sufficient thanks. So take my life, transform, renew and change me, that I might be a living sacrifice. Consider Christ, that he could trust his Father in the Garden of Gethsemane. Though full of dread and fearful of the anguish, he drank the cup that was reserved for me. My Lord and God, you are so rich in mercy, mere words alone are not sufficient thanks. So take my life, transform, renew and change me, that I might be a living sacrifice. Consider Christ, for death he has defeated, and he arose, appeared for all to see. And now he sits at God's right hand in heaven, where he prepares a resting place for me. My Lord and God, you are so rich in mercy, mere words alone are not sufficient thanks. So take my life, transform, renew and change me, that I might be a living sacrifice. And I invite you all now to stand as we sing our closing hymn, which also just follows on from this and just speaks about how we should respond to what Jesus has done in drinking this cup for us.
Closing track again.
It's number 330.